births within the group. E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. End of quote.
So the ICJ President, International Court of Justice President, has declared that there is sufficient evidence of dispute exists for the genocide case. The judge says that the court will not throw away the case.
The provisions of the convention are intended to protect the members of a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group from acts of genocide or any other punishable acts enumerated in Article 3. The court considers that there is a correlation between the rights of members of groups protected under the Genocide Convention.
This is the live feed
the obligations
from The Hague.
Incumbent on state parties thereto, and the right of any state party to seek compliance therewith by another state party. As the court has stated in other cases, in order for acts to fall within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, the intent must be to destroy at least a substantial part of a particular group. This is demanded by the very nature of the crime of genocide, since the object and purpose of the Convention as a whole is to prevent the intentional destruction of groups. The part targeted must be significant enough to have an impact on the group as a whole. The Palestinians appear to constitute a distinct national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, and hence a protected group within the meaning of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. The court observes that, according to United Nations sources, the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip comprises over 2 million people. Palestinians in the Gaza Strip form a substantial part of the protected group. The court notes that the military operation being conducted by Israel following the attack of 7 October 2023 has resulted in a large number of deaths and injuries, as well as massive destruction of homes, the forcible displacement of the vast majority of the population, and extensive damage to civilian infrastructure. While figures relating to the Gaza Strip cannot be independently verified, recent information indicates that 25,700 Palestinians have been killed, over 63,000 injuries have been reported, over 360 housing units have been destroyed or partially damaged, and approximately 1.7 million persons have been internally displaced.
Good God. She's taking a glass of water, the judge.
The court takes note in this regard of the statement by the United Nations Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mr. Martin Griffiths, on 5 January 2024. I quote, "Gaza has become a place of death and despair. Families are sleeping in the open as temperatures plummet. Areas where civilians were told to relocate for their safety have come under bombardment. Medical facilities are under relentless attack. A public health disaster is unfolding. Gaza has simply become uninhabitable. Its people are witnessing daily threats to their very existence while the world watches on." End of quote. Following a mission to North Gaza, the World Health Organization reported that as of 21 December 2023, I quote, "An unprecedented 93% of the population of Gaza is facing crisis levels of hunger, with insufficient food."
93% of a population. That gets pretty close to an entire population, doesn't it?
The court further notes the statement issued by the Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, or UNRWA, Mr. Philippe Lazzarini, on 13 January 2024.
So just to be clear, what has been ruled at the moment? What's been ruled at the moment is the International Court of Justice has ruled that it will not throw out the genocide case that Israel requested them to throw out. The court, quote, "considers that it cannot accede or agree to Israel's request that the case be removed from the general list." Now, the general list this is a list of genocide cases which will go on for years, believe it or not. So what they're trying to arrive at now is an advisory judgment where they will recommend, presumably, that Israel cease their military actions. They will potentially request a ceasefire. It's not legally binding. It's not binding. It's a recommendation and a suggestion, but it puts enormous moral pressure, not only on Israel, but the rest of the world that's supporting the current hostilities. The ICJ also rules it has jurisdiction over the genocide case. There was the possibility that perhaps it wasn't even applicable, the Genocide Convention. But Judge Donoghue has said that the court concludes it has first glance jurisdiction on the case, meaning it can continue. Just kind of summarizing. Judge Donoghue has said that some allegations against Israel fall within the provisions of the Genocide Convention. Listen to that again. Some allegations against Israel do fall within the provisions of the Genocide Convention. As the reading continues, the ICJ president says Palestinians do appear to be a protected group under the convention. So you can't, there's not the suggestion that they're not a real people.
That the crisis in Gaza is, I quote, compounded.
This is the judge at The Hague
language,
still reading her verdict.
In this regard, the court has taken note of a number of statements made by senior Israeli officials. It calls attention in particular to the following examples. On 9 October 2023, Gallant, Defense Minister of Israel, announced that he had ordered a complete siege of Gaza City, and that there would be no electricity, no food, no fuel, and that everything was closed. On the following day, Minister Gallant stated, speaking to Israeli troops on the Gaza border, I quote, "I have released all restraints. You saw what we are fighting against. We are fighting human animals. This is the ISIS of Gaza. This is what we are fighting against. Gaza won't return to what it was before. There will be no Hamas. We will eliminate everything. If it doesn't take one day, it will take a week. It will take weeks or even months. We will reach all places." End of quote.
So she is currently reading some of the comments made by leaders, ministers, generals, in Israel,
referring to
as
Gaza,
proof. Prima facie, I can never say it. Prima facie, what does it mean in this? In order to gain any temporary measures on Friday, South Africa does not need to prove that genocide has overall taken place. All it needs to prove is that the court has jurisdiction at first glance and that some of the acts that it draws attention to, in this case, including the death toll, forced displacement, etc., could all fall under the Genocide Convention.
We are at war. We are at war. We are at war. We are defending our homes. We are protecting our homes. That's the truth. And when a nation protects its home, it fights. And we will fight until we break their backbone. End of quote. On 13 October 2023, Mr. Israel Katz, then Minister of Energy and Infrastructure of Israel, stated on X, formerly Twitter, I quote, "We will fight the terrorist organization Hamas and destroy it. All the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. We will win. They will not receive a drop of water or a single battery until they leave the world." End of quote. The court also takes note of a press release of 16 November 2023, issued by 37 special rapporteurs, independent experts, and members of working groups part of the special procedures of the United Nations Human Rights Council.
So she's reading out some of the quotes that, I don't know if you remember, Nadia actually posted on her Instagram when there was the fear that genocidal language was being used.
Government officials. End of quote. In addition, on 27 October 2023, the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination observed that it was highly concerned about the sharp increase in racist hate speech and dehumanization directed at Palestinians since 7 October. In the court's view, the aforementioned facts and circumstances are sufficient to conclude that at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa and for which it is seeking protection are plausible. This is the case with respect to the right of Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts identified in Article 3, and the right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligations under the convention. The court then turns to the condition of the link between the plausible rights claimed by South Africa and the provisional measures requested. It considers that by their very nature, at least some of the provisional measures sought by South Africa are aimed at preserving the plausible rights it asserts on the basis of the Genocide Convention in the present case, namely, the right of the Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts mentioned in Article 3, and the right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligations under the Convention. Therefore, a link exists between the rights claimed by South Africa that the court has found to be plausible and at least some of the provisional measures requested.
Essentially, in part, South Africa have succeeded.
The court turns next to the question of risk of irreparable prejudice and urgency. It notes that, pursuant to Article 41 of its statute, it has the power to indicate provisional measures when irreparable prejudice could be caused to rights which are the subject of judicial proceedings, or when the alleged disregard of such rights might entail irreparable consequences. However, the power of the court to indicate provisional measures will only be exercised if there's urgency in the sense that there is a real and imminent risk that irreparable prejudice will be caused to the rights claimed before the court gives its final decision. The condition of urgency is met when the acts susceptible of causing irreparable prejudice can occur at any moment before the court makes the final decision in the case. The court must therefore consider whether such a risk exists at this stage of the proceedings. The court is not called upon for purposes of its decision on the request for the indication of provisional measures to establish the existence of breaches of obligations under the Genocide Convention, but to determine whether the circumstances require the indication of provisional measures for the protection of rights under that instrument. As already noted, the court cannot at this stage make definitive findings of fact, and the right of each party to submit arguments with respect to the merits remains unaffected by the court's decision on the request for the indication of provisional measures. The court recalls that, as underlined in General Assembly Resolution 96-1 of 11 December 1946, I quote, "Genocide is a denial of the right of existence of entire human groups, as homicide is the denial of the right to live of individual human beings. Such denial of the right of existence shocks the conscience of mankind, results in great losses to humanity in the form of cultural and other contributions represented by these human groups, and is contrary to moral law and to the spirit and aims of the United Nations." End of quote. In view of the fundamental values sought to be protected by the Genocide Convention, the court considers that the plausible rights in question in this proceeding, namely the right of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts identified in Article 3 of the Genocide Convention, and the right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligation under the Convention, are of such a nature that prejudice to them is capable of causing irreparable harm. During the ongoing conflict, senior United Nations officials have repeatedly called attention to the risk of further deterioration of conditions in the Gaza Strip. The court takes note, for instance, of the letter dated 6 December 2023, whereby the Secretary General of the United Nations brought the following information to the attention of the Security Council. I quote, "The healthcare system in Gaza is collapsing. Nowhere is safe in Gaza. Amid constant bombarding by the Israel Defense Forces and without shelter or the essentials to survive, I expect public order to completely
So this
break
essentially is not looking in any way, not that it, talking in terms of good or bad, it's not looking good for Israel.
An even worse situation could unfold, including epidemic diseases and increased
terms of the
pressure for
verdict.
mass displacement into neighboring countries. We are facing a severe risk of collapse of the humanitarian system."
When you hear all of the statements by all of the charities and aid agencies and United Nations and all of these groups, you're staggered and amazed, or I am more and more staggered and amazed at the blind support that the likes of Biden, Starmer and Rishi have demonstrated.
The Secretary General
Shocking.
again to the Security Council,
Just hang our heads in shame.
on the situation in the Gaza Strip, and observing that, I quote, "Sadly, devastating levels of death and destruction continue." End of quote.
What you're hearing is the voice of the judge at the
of
International
the 17
Court.
January 2024 statement issued by the UNRWA Commissioner General upon return from his fourth visit to the Gaza Strip since the beginning of the current conflict in Gaza. I quote, "Every time I visit Gaza, I witness how people have sunk further into despair, with the struggle for survival consuming every hour." End of quote. The court considers that the civilian population in the Gaza Strip remains extremely vulnerable. It recalls that the military operation conducted by Israel after 7 October 2023 has resulted inter alia in tens of thousands of deaths and injuries and the destruction of homes, schools, medical facilities, and other vital infrastructure, as well as displacement on a massive scale. The court notes that the operation is ongoing and that the Prime Minister of Israel announced on 18 January 2024 that the war, I quote, "will take many more long months," end of quote. At present, many Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have no access to the most basic foodstuffs, potable water, electricity, essential medicines, or heating. The World Health Organization has estimated that 15% of the women giving birth in Gaza Strip are likely to experience complications, and indicates that
How?
maternal and newborn death rates
I
are
wonder if
expected to
anyone
increase
in our
due to
government
the
is
lack
listening
of
to this.
access to medical care.
I'd love to know if anyone in the
In these
Labour front
circumstances,
benches
the court
or our
considers
government
that
is
the
listening to this.
catastrophic humanitarian situation in the
What do you
Gaza
think,
Strip
guys?
is at serious risk of deteriorating further before the court renders its final judgment.
This is the International Court of Justice judge.
The court recalls Israel's statement that it has taken certain steps to address and alleviate the conditions faced by the population in the Gaza Strip. The court further notes that the Attorney General of Israel recently stated that a call for intentional harm to civilians may amount to a criminal offense, including that of incitement, and that several such cases are being examined by Israeli law enforcement authorities. While such steps are to be encouraged, they are insufficient to remove the risk that irreparable prejudice will be caused before the court issues its final decision in the case.
Wow.
In light of the foregoing, the court considers that there is urgency in the sense that there is a real and imminent risk that irreparable prejudice will be caused to the rights found by the court to be plausible before it gives its final decision. The court concludes, on the basis of the aforementioned considerations, that the conditions required by its statute for it to indicate provisional measures are met. It is therefore necessary, pending its final decision, for the court to indicate certain measures in order to protect the rights claimed by South Africa that the court has found to be plausible. The court recalls that it has the power under its statute, when a request for provisional measures has been made,
Provisional
to
measures is
indicate
essentially to
measures that
cease.
are in whole or in part other than those requested. In the present case, having considered the terms of the provisional measures requested by South Africa and the circumstances of the case, the court finds that the measures indicated need not be identical to those requested. The court considers that, with regard to the present situation, Israel must, in accordance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, in relation to Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, in particular, A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. The court recalls that these acts fall within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention when they are committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part the group as such. The court further considers that Israel must ensure with immediate effect that its military forces do not commit any of the aforementioned acts. The court is also of the view that Israel must take measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to the members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. The court further considers that Israel must take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Israel must also take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention against members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. Regarding the provisional measure requested by South Africa that Israel must submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to the order, the court recalls that it has the power, reflected in Article 78 of the Rules of Court, to request the parties to provide information on any matter connected with the implementation of any provisional measures it has indicated. In view of the specific provisional measures it has decided to indicate, the court considers that Israel must submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month as from the date of this order. The report so provided shall then be communicated to South Africa, which shall be given the opportunity to submit to the court its comments thereon. The court recalls that its orders on provisional measures under Article 41 of the statute have binding effect and thus create international legal obligations for any party to whom the provisional measures are addressed. The court reaffirms that the decision given in the present proceedings in no way prejudges the question of the jurisdiction of the court to deal with the merits of the case or any questions related to the admissibility of the application or to the merits themselves. It leaves unaffected the right of the governments of the Republic of South Africa and the State of Israel to submit arguments in respect of these questions. The order then states that the court deems it necessary to emphasize that all parties to the conflict in the Gaza Strip are bound by international humanitarian law. It is gravely concerned about the fate of the hostages abducted during the attack in Israel on 7 October 2023 and held since then by Hamas and other armed groups, and calls for their immediate and unconditional release. I shall now read out the operative part of the order. For these reasons, the court indicates the following provisional measures. 1. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to the Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, in particular, A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge Ad hoc Moseneke. Against, Judge Sebatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall ensure with immediate effect that its military does not commit any acts described in point 1 above. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge Ad hoc Moseneke. Against, Judge Sebatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak. By 16 votes to 1, the State of Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka.
So essentially the
Abraham,
findings, this sounds
Benuna,
like, what they're
Yusuf,
essentially almost
Shway,
saying is you
Bandari,
can't harm
Robinson,
anyone. It's
Salam,
making it, is it not
Iwasawa,
making it
Nolte,
legally impossible
Charlesworth, Brand,
for Israel to in
Judges
any way
Ad hoc,
attack?
Barak, Masenike.
I mean, maybe that's what, falling short of saying ceasefire.
By 16 votes to 1, the State of Israel shall take immediate and effective measures to ensure the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judges Ad hoc, Barak, Masenike. Against, Judge Sabatinde. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2.
So essentially at the moment, the International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to prevent genocide in Gaza. The problem we have here is that Israel would argue that they're not committing genocide already in Gaza. So are we falling between two stools here? Are we ending up with something that Israel can just say, well, yeah, of course?
Judge Ad hoc Masenike. Against,
Trying to make sense of
Judge
this.
Sabatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month as from the date of the order. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge Ad hoc Masenike. Against, Judge Sabatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak.
Michelle, I'm explaining,
I shall
but
now call upon the registrar to read the operative part of the order in French.
so no insult to the French there, but yeah, so it's incredibly odd, it's that sort of legalese language where essentially the ICJ has ordered Israel to report to it within a month on what it's doing to uphold the order to take all measures within its power to prevent acts of genocide. They've created international legal obligations for Israel. The International Court of Justice also orders Israel to take all measures within its power to prevent genocide. It says Israel must ensure its forces do not commit genocide and ensure preservation of evidence of alleged genocide. But Israel doesn't believe genocide is happening. And if it was happening, how can we trust that they will protect any evidence? With the reading continuing, the ICJ has ordered Israel to take measures to prevent and punish direct incitement of genocide in the Gaza Strip. It's happened. Encouragement has happened. She quoted everyone. I don't quite see, she listed the statements, the dehumanizing language that was used. She listed them all. You felt it. She described the state of things by aid agencies. And then this is advising them to take measures. But the problem we have here is the assumption that we're dealing with a government, Netanyahu, and a force that promotes and is sort of running around the beaches and everything, sort of doing all it's doing and sort of like, taking nothing seriously. How do you enact that? How do you enact that? It feels like it doesn't go far enough one way, but equally it says it could. It's kind of like everything says it could be happening. It could be happening. Is that not? Is that how it feels to you? Everyone says they feel it could be happening. I'm just pulling up the how's Al Jazeera reporting it. Al Jazeera is reporting it. Court orders Israel to prevent, punish genocide incitement. How do you, if a country is committing genocide, they're not going to promote it, are they? They're not going to openly and honestly share information that purports to them. There seems to be a kind of logical impasse here. I mean, it's like it's like saying to someone, you know, if you're the one doing something bad in the larder, it's up to you to come and tell us that you've made sure nothing bad happens in the larder. Well, you're going to come back and say nothing bad's happened in the larder. Does anyone else feel that? It just strikes me as utterly bizarre. It's still, yeah, Israel will make a mockery of whatever. I mean, it feels like a damp squib, but it feels like there's merit to what South Africa have said. There feels that there is a case, that there is enough evidence to suggest it could be happening. But what they've done is they've handed responsibility to Israel to manage it. Is that right? That's kind of where I feel we're at. Let's hand so rather than policing it, this verdict asks Israel to police it. Strikes me as perverse. Is that right? Is that the reading anyone else is getting? Let's have a look at how other press. International Court of Justice orders Israel to prevent genocide in Gaza. What does that mean? Judge Donoghue says the court has decided that Israel must take all measures within its power. What does that mean? The court has heard that Israel must ensure the preservation of evidence. We know that the preservation of evidence isn't reliable. Judge Donoghue ordered Israel to report to the court within a month. I'm sorry, that all feels a bit. All we wanted to hear was ceasefire, but instead they've given Israel more power. Well, they've given Israel time. They've given Israel time and space to not change anything, and in a sense, clear their side of the street, right? All we wanted to hear was ceasefire, but instead they've given Israel more power. Why does Israel have so much power? Sorry if this is a stupid question. Complete bias. Yeah, this is a provisional decision, of course, but it's a live, living catastrophe crisis. The judge even said 1.7 million Palestinians displaced. It feels hugely. They're not committing genocide. In fact, she read the quote suggesting genocidal intent has been encouraged. So I think, when you say what positives are there to be drawn from this, I think for those who are of the opinion that Israel is engaged in genocidal acts, I think this will. This doesn't say they're not. It doesn't say they aren't. And so, I think one of the things that perhaps might change from this is you can't castigate, marginalize, criticize, or pull down anyone who feels culturally, physically, and nationally, as a Palestinian or Arab, that a genocide is being enacted. You are not invoking a word meaninglessly, because even the International Court of Justice has said there is reason, enough evidence and enough concern here for this to go forward. So there is enough doubt. There's the thing. There's enough doubt, which means that, in a huge argument being pushed back from the Israeli government and the likes of Rishi and Biden and everyone is that they're without doubt, Israel is clean. And this at least throws doubt over that. It doesn't definitively, I thought they would have come out of this saying if there's enough doubt, and there's some doubt, presumably stop current military actions. But I have to confess, it feels like it's like Israel is responsible for giving itself its own school report on whether it's a genocidal nation or whether what they're doing is genocidal. It's like they've been put in charge of doing their own, horrible analogy, I know, but Ofsted report. It's ridiculous. It strikes me as ridiculous because, of course, they're going to bring something back in a month where they've had more time to think and more time to kind of construct or not hide evidence. They must make sure they don't hide evidence. This speaks back to this thing that I've talked to you before about, which is this. When people sometimes say, not always, sometimes say there's no evidence of a cover-up, it's because the cover-up has been successful. Anyway, I just thought it was important that you heard it from the court yourself, because as lots of you said, it's not even on the national news. Absolutely shambolic. Anyway, guys, lots of love. Gonna go, and obviously we'll be analysing this in more detail tomorrow in the papers, Coffee Moaning papers. All right, guys. Yeah, it feels very half-hearted.